Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to the Ghost Wolf stream. So today we're going to be talking about, data, right? Data as it pertains to Darktide, because there's still a lot of unknowns when it comes to Darktide. So what did I do? I did what any normal human being does when confronted with a problem, and I turned to Excel. So let's talk about this spreadsheet that you're viewing here. So this is a work in progress. However, I'm making them for every weapon for the Psyker class. Although theoretically this could work for basically any other class, because a weapon's a weapon, really. So there's some modifiers here, right? So this tab here, we're going to be looking at strictly what the Psykers use is called the Force Sword. So for us, it's normally titled Blaze Force Sword, but we'll just go with Force Sword. And I have some descriptions here of what every stat does after quite a bit of investigation. This is what I came down to. So let's get into it before we go through each menu option that you see here. So for finesse is a statistic that shows how much damage an opponent will receive if you hit them in a head or a weak spot. So on humanoids, it's a head. For their weak spot, a weak spot for a dog, I think, is also the head, and the weak spots change based on what enemy that you're facing. Basically, most of these enemies in the game are humanoids, so their weak spot is going to be in the head. Warp resistance isn't really taken into account for damage output, but for just clarification, warp resistance lowers the peril requirements to use on the sword on the force. So there is a big misconception going out there right now, and I have the data to prove it, that warp resistance basically reduces the amount of warp damage you generate, but that's not entirely true. Warp resistance actually just lowers the amount of warp that you need to use that sword. So, for example, there is a move here on the Force Sword, which is when I activate my Force. So you'll notice that dipped to 19%, right? 19%. Well, let me clear it real quick. Flat 19%. It will always be 19%. Let's change it to maybe a... oh, whoops. I was also using the wrong sword. So that's good to know. So let's change it to... So that warp resistance was 65%. Let's change it to something markedly less. So 29%. 29% warp resistance. Now I get 33%, right? So I have to use more warp to be able to use that same attack. So that's why that's important for Psykers. So let's change this back to the Obscurus Mark II Blaze Force Sword, which is what I currently have. I should probably find a different way to differentiate it, but I was using this sword as the test sword for this Excel sheet. So let's go back into it. As you can see, the Obscurus Mark II Blaze Force Sword. So let's go over the next one's damage modifier is just a damage boost modifier in addition to that base damage. The mobility is a weapon characteristic to show what bonuses you get for mobility. So sprinting, dodging, aiming, all of that gets a percentage multiplier. First target, it shows you a stat on how much damage you inflict on the first enemy hit. There is a reset countdown to this. I haven't narrowed it down yet, but basically when you hit something and you wait, I think it's 3 or 4 more seconds, the next hit after those 4 seconds is considered a first hit again on an enemy, even if it was on that enemy again. And then the first target, then power is a pretty vague term, but power is a multiplier across all of your damage after the multipliers have been taken into effect. So if you've been keeping up, you have your base damage. So let me go back here. So let's take a look at a real life example here. You have your base damage, which on a light attack is 49 damage, 49 units of damage. Then the way the game calculates it is then it takes into account your modifiers. So your modifier is in 47% damage. It adds 47% of that 49. Then it moves on to your perk. This is how the game calculates your damage. So now we're looking at 49 times 0.47. Then it includes your perk. The game will check, are you hitting an infested enemy? Are you hitting an armored enemy? And then add on an additional base damage onto that. So for clarity, when it says 20% damage on any perk or any modifier, it is multiplying that percentage to your light attack or to your heavy attack. Okay, that's important. Now, for blessings for power, currently it multiplies that percentage across the whole sum total of your power. So power refers to the entire damage that you deal after your modifiers and after your perks are taken into account. This is important because it's not 2% of 49, it's 2% of now what is going to be 114 or 129. So unstable power will give me power, or will grant me an additional percentage up to 2%, which scales with my perils. The more peril I generate as a psyker, the closer I can get to that max unstable power. So 100% theoretically being that 2% number. So super important there on how that's all calculated. So let's go back to the Excel spreadsheet here. So light attack is 49 base damage. A heavy attack is 82 damage. And then we have our modifiers here split up into different percentages. All of this we saw just right now in the game. Okay. Then what I did was I took the perks and assigned them to their percentage amplifiers. So damage increased 20%. The condition is that it needs to be an infested enemy to be able to get this 20%. The next up is, of course, the unarmored enemy, and it needs to be an unarmored enemy that I'm hitting to get that 15%. And then I also took into account a percentage amplifier, and the condition is on my peril level. So all of this is in the Excel spreadsheet. It's all good to go. And so then next up, and again, this is not an exhaustive list yet, I'm currently still working on it, is the simulation. What's marked as the simulation here. So let me actually just make this a little bit bigger. And we'll make this 20. And we'll put a nice light teal color here. So these columns, just to walk you through it, are the enemy types, their armor type. In reality, there are 3 armors that you can get. And this is another thing that I was working with. So there's 6 enemies, an infested, an unarmored, a flak armored, a maniac, and unyielding, which are the giant trolls, and the carapace armored. Even though there's 6 enemies, there's only 3 different armor types, okay? You have a flak armor, you have thick skin for the maniac, and you have carapace. Now, thick skin is not an official term, but that's just what I'm calling it after that multiplier. So, then I took the type of attack that we'll be simulating, so a light attack for all of these, and the base damage that they have. Now, here is the critical part, right? There is, in the menu of Darktide, when you go to your cosmetics, you're going to hit V, right? And then you get the damage breakdown. Then you hit tab to get the table, right? So all of this is supported by data. So you can get the table of all of the damage that you'll have. But what this table doesn't take into account are your modifiers. So this is 49 base damage on unarmored. It does not take into account the modifiers on your current weapon. I don't know why it doesn't do that, but it doesn't. And then it calculates weak spot damage, critical damage, and critical weak spot damage. So weak spot being if you hit them in the head, critical if you just get a chance to crit, and then critical weak spot is if you hit them in the head and manage to crit on top of that. So I'm going to show you why it doesn't take, this table doesn't take into account your modifiers. Because if we go to an unarmored and we go to the weak spot, which would be the head, we would expect to get 114 out of it. So let's go to unarmored. I think it's unarmored. Okay. So we have to aim at the head. That was a crit, so that's 159, doesn't count. That's a 138. Go to the next one. Well, he died, and sometimes it glitches out, but I'm pretty sure that was a 138. Well, he died immediately. When you kill them immediately, you don't get to see it. It'll just... So that one was 138. So sometimes you'll get unarmored with different health pools. So 138. 138 is that number that keeps popping up. But that is not the number on the table. Okay? So that's super important to note. That number on the table will not tell you or take into account modifiers or auras or anything like that. So as you can see, I have on the bottom left, I generated a Mind Blast aura because I had a chance to do that. So I'm doing more damage now, 154. That's why my damage gets a little bit variable. Okay? So important note. I assume that will be fixed in the future patches. Okay, so next up is armor duration. So armor duration percentage is the amount of percent decrease in damage that an enemy's armor will do on your first or on any attack, because this is constant and will never change. So on flak enemies, so this is a flak enemy, you can see 99, 99, 99 weak spot. Okay, so that reduces it down 25%. A maniac is these ragers over here. I actually don't know what these are called, and the game calls them something else, but these are maniacs. Hit them, and that's 66 damage. So their thick skin reduces your base damage by 49%. 49%. That's quite a bit. And then Carapace Armored reduces your base damage by 100%. Now, when you hit an enemy, you can't hit them for 0. I guess the game doesn't like the number 0. I understand. So instead, the game will give you 1 or 2. So I hit 1, 1, 1. It gives me double the bonus, I guess, because it's a weak spot hit. 2, 1, 2, 1. So all of that. So the Carapace, absolutely, there's no weak spot on Carapace. Nothing. All of it will be won with a melee attack for Psykers. Again, I stress this for Psykers. So your damage after armor is going to be 0 or it's going to be 1. So after that, I took into account all the damage modifiers, your finesse modifier, your first target modifier, and I split them into categories. So you have your weak spot total damage on first hit, and then your weak spot total damage on consecutive hits, because any hit after that will take away that first target multiplier. So actually, I kind of forgot to do that just to show you guys. Take the sum, and you'll take the damage after armor, finesse armor, add in the perk, and 114.66, which is what we saw, right? This is the weak spot total damage on a consecutive hit. $138, 90, 144. So you'll see things are pretty variable because of the auras that you can generate in the game. But in general, this is the closest number. This is even more correct than what's in the table in the game. So let's use those numbers as reference, and let's graph this out real quick. Let's develop a little bar chart. So an infested enemy, again, this is all on first hit. You'll do about 127. An unarmored enemy with this weapon, you'll do a little bit less, 125, because of that difference in percentage, right? An infested enemy and an unarmored enemy have different percentages. So I expect to do more against an infested enemy than I do an unarmored enemy. Your weak spot total damage, your flak against a flak armored, you're doing about 105. It's about a 20% reduction in damage to a flak armored, again, just melee. Then a maniac does nearly 35% gross total reduction damage. And then back to unyielding. Unyielding are these guys. And actually, I was surprised that unyielding does not take that much damage reduction. See, I still do 131, 131, 131 to these guys. If I hit him in the back, it's not a weak spot. If I hit him in the arm, it's not a weak spot. But I still do quite a bit of damage if I hit them in the head. 131. Even though he's pretty armored, he looks bulky. So, interesting fact there, too, about unyielding characters. And then the Carapace Armored. Carapace Armored, is down to 1, right? I cannot do any melee damage on an initial hit. So, almost pointless as a psyker. Kind of run. It's pointless to even hit them, right? You want to back away, and you want to be able to get the line pop off, right? 125 damage right there off the bat. So that's important. The next thing I want to cover, right? We were all told in the tutorial that, hey, you can chain attacks together. You saw that 3 attacks will, on your 3rd attack, you'll do almost double the damage. But what they don't tell you is that it is very contingent. Your weapon swing has trajectory. So I would expect to do a certain amount of damage to this guy. So hit him in the head. Maybe he's not a great example. Let's go to someone with a little bit more health. I would expect this guy to take equal damage when I hit him in the head. 151, 151. But did you see it on my 2nd attack? It dropped to 66. Let's replay that back. I would expect to do 151, then another 151, and then finish it off with a double attack. So, just to clarify what I mean. So 99, 43, 210 in that order. But what's happening is, why am I getting that 99 value? And that's because, if you notice, I'll play that in slow motion, when I do that 2nd swing, that back swing, that backhanded swing, I'm actually hitting him in his chest. So we'll go front swing, oh, front swing, back swing, front swing. You need to be able to hit them, to be able to get the full damage DPS out of a melee attack. Hit them in the head consistently. So you want to aim a little bit up, and you get that bonus still. So do up. It's probably better if I use one of these unyieldings over here. Yeah, unyieldings are even harder because they're taller than me. So I still get that 43 off. So if I go up, look up. So if I go up, up. So it takes some, the point of that is it takes some aiming to kind of go up and down to be able to get that full maximum damage. So if I go up, stab, I get a little bit closer, but that was a crit. So up, stab, 131, 131, 262. So I did just now 524 damage to that guy, which is more than a quarter of that from from hitting his chest from that backswing. So little nuances in this game are really, really important. The next nuance is the strong attack. So the strong attack will apply to everybody. So we were told in training that strong attacks do more damage, and they do, right? They do, depending on where you hit them, anywhere between 200 to 300 damage. So what they don't tell you is how long you're supposed to hold them. Sometimes, and this was my mistake, maybe not everybody does this, is I would catch myself charging up a good size hit, but you don't need to charge it up that long. That hit, 218, is the same hit if I do half that time, 218. So you can actually do very quick, strong attacks without needing to do a big charge up like that. Right, so if I charge it for 218 to 300 and 218, there is no bonus damage the longer you hold this. It will always be a strong attack from the minute you hold the button down long enough for it to be a strong attack. So, some more interesting things that I noted there. Anyways, that was just about 18 minutes of a Manic Man rambling over an Excel document he created on the Psyker class. Now, this isn't the end of this Excel spreadsheet. I want to add in all of the staffs. What's the best staff for a Psyker? I want to get really in-depth with it, but this is just, you know, a first look, first draft kind of thing. So anyways, thanks for listening to my rant.